Oh, and we are live. Hello, LinkedIn. Hello, YouTube. Hello, world. It is Friday. We do these fireside chats every so often. Sometimes they include pizza, Josh. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes, or most times, I just say it's Pizza Friday as a marketing tactic. Really, it's clickbait.
No pizza given. Okay, I'll get my own pizza.
We are in the great state of New Jersey, and we are live from the NJ Content Studio, which, if you've been following along at any bit, you will know that we are in the process of opening up like 3 new spots downstairs. But more on that later. I'm joined by Mr. Josh Halpern. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but he's with a ton of awesome initiatives. Getting to Global, the Grow Big initiative. He's also known as the Van Ambassador. So, Josh, welcome. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
All right. Thanks, Steve, for having me. Yeah, I've been wanting to sit down and chat about all sorts of things here. So I'm Josh Halpern. I used to be a U.S. commercial diplomat. So I served over in Beijing at the embassy there for a number of years, helping U.S. companies enter the China market as part of an economic development program for the U.S., basically helping create jobs through exports. So I worked a lot with Alibaba before anyone knew what that was, and Jingdong and Amazon when they had the CN, and basically helped the luxury goods space, beauty, auto parts, all sorts of arenas getting into the market. And then I was asked to launch this e-commerce innovation lab for the Department of Commerce under the Obama administration, helping companies go global, not just to China, but everywhere through e-commerce. And then got funding from Google, Facebook, and others to start an initiative called Getting to Global, which we currently run. We've been doing that for about 8 years, helping companies self-service through training, as well as running workshops on global expansion through e-commerce.
I mean, incredible resume. I mean, your CV reads like if I asked ChatGPT to write like an awesome resume for myself, it'd probably pull out like the ambassador and Obama administration and all this cool shit. Really excited to have you here today because next week is Branders Fest, and it's all about helping entrepreneurs and founders, just up their game when it comes to their brand, when it comes to their marketing. And I think a lot of founders have this vision of going global or leveraging cross-border, strategies. And so who better to have talking about it than you? So what is, from a 2024 perspective, why should brands think about going global as opposed to just staying here in like their local market? What are some of the advantages versus disadvantages?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think a lot of people finally, we've been doing this for a while. Going global was the last thing people were talking about. In fact, getting online was their biggest challenge. And then COVID hit, everyone went online, and we're now starting people get through the haze of what does it mean to be, and not just B2C, but B2Bs, what does it mean to be online and start to actually transact online? And so now on the other side of all this, we're seeing people say, hey, how do I get access to the majority of consumers, especially in emerging markets that are really getting online? They're buying products, and 82% of people have bought products cross-border, $7.3 trillion expected to be operating just through cross-border e-commerce sales in the future. And the U.S. in particular has a very small amount of the global, let's call it e-commerce market that we play in. We weren't inherently, by virtue of the fact that we have our built-in market, we weren't focused on cross-border. But we are seeing that. And what we're seeing is companies now more than ever have the ability to go global through tools that allow them to do things that were never before possible. Not only now can you see who's buying what, you can use the Jungle Scouts of the world, Helium 10s, et cetera, to see who's buying what on marketplaces like Amazon. So you can tell what your competition is doing in new markets. But you can also facilitate the duties and taxes and all the other features that come with that, from a currency of assessments on your platform to currency down to reducing the decimals. So if translation looks completely, from a currency perspective, looks completely native. All these things are happening in a way that was just never possible on all your e-commerce platforms. So,
I mean, as we start talking about that, I can't help but think about this notion of like competing on price and going global. Does that mean that you just have to sacrifice your brand and just be price sensitive and try to win on lowest price? Or how important is this idea of brand when you are breaking into a new market?
It's a great question.
Global.
The number one thing I think you can do, first of all, to manage or maintain your price structure is get on social, be there, have an audience that vouches for you, right? I mean, you go into any sort of experience in your life, you go into a party and people say, do I talk to this guy or not? And then all of a sudden, the coolest kid in the room goes over and says hi to you, and everyone else is like, oh, okay, he's not a crazy person. That's essentially what we're talking about in cross-border. Like, you go into a new market and they're like, I don't know what should I think? And you're pulling at straws trying to figure out where this person sits in the kind of hierarchy of brand and paying, how much should I pay for this? And then you see the social validation. I think across border, it almost is even exponential compared to domestic, because that's all they have to go by. They go to your Instagram, they go to your TikTok. So branding is the number one way to, I think, maintain your price structure. But in general, we say that you can actually charge more depending on the market, but you can charge a premium. I would be very careful about that. But people do say about 15% above your US retail price is probably as high up as you'd want to go. And that's building into the idea that, hey, this is a product you can't access in your current market. If they can access it in your current market, I guarantee they're going to know exactly how much they should be paying for it. And everyone can see the prices globally. So you got to be careful.
Josh, I want to respond to that, but John Bertino from the Agency Guide, are you going to join us live?
Join who live?
Me and Josh Halpern. I mean, it's just a party in here.
Sunglasses. He's all ready for his trip. He's all ready for his vacation. He's got his haircut, and now he's got his glasses.
He smells good. I mean, this kid cleans up nicely.
He looks like, not many people look like they smell good. He looks like now, right? Like he just came out of the shower. He's got he looks like he smells good.
Josh, to what you just said about, is there, if you're an American company going across the border, how much weight is there in made in the USA or designed in the USA? And does that constitute the 15% price hike that you were just talking about?
Yeah, I would say it used to be the answer was a flat out yes. And now it's more of it depends on the category. And even that, it depends on the kind of the current competition in the market. So I'll break that down a little. Originally, it was, hey, I mean, I lived in China for 7 years. We would do everything we could. In fact, in your hood was where we bought baby formula out of the trunk of a car, because we didn't believe in the logistics and the supply chain kind of integrity in China, even for products that were labeled from from Europe at that point. So it used to be, hey, we trust American filtering of quality down to the person. We know that there's a quality there. So we prefer paying more to have it shipped cross-border. Now you're getting a lot more companies that are there. They're accessing the markets across, not just in China and in Asia in general, but everywhere. So it starts to depend on the category.
Yeah.
There are certain things that I would say fashion in Asia, they still consider in a lot of ways France and in Europe as the fashion capital.
Yeah.
For us, we're the health and beauty, I would say, space. Beauty, again, for Asia, probably more Korea. But in a lot of places, we are the healthy, natural land. Still a branding position, because in truth, a lot of our ingredients are coming from even China. Some of the best ingredients in supplements now come from China. But people don't know that, or they don't want to talk about that. However, I think that in general, you can charge a little bit of a premium. Again, as I was saying, 15% though, I wouldn't push it.
Yeah. How interesting that you start to look at, like you said, like the States were known for certain categories. That's a really fascinating viewpoint. And it absolutely makes sense. Like I could think about it. Like you just think about a country and you think about a product, or you think about like what they're really good at.
Yeah, well, and there's also submarkets, and we've got to be careful. People are becoming more sophisticated about it. It's not made in USA. It's made in California. It's made in Brooklyn. I remember at the embassy, like if we did an event, if it were Brooklyn, it would get a lot more than if it was generic US. If it was California, you'd have the surfers and the long hair. Like Taco Bell rebranded themselves entirely, I think, as like a surfer kind of thing in Japan. There were lines out the door. Like a Subway was, or it was Nathan's that launched. It was all about New York City. They were selling New York. I think you can't just rely on the US anymore as a USA brand.
Really interesting. That's really fascinating. What do you think is like a really bold move that brands are not making that helps them stay relevant, especially in the e-commerce space? Like, what are brands not doing that they should be, and it just pisses you off, and you want to go beat
Well,
somebody up?
yeah, when I well, I'll say a couple of actionable things that just evade most brands. Like if you're going global, you're telling me you don't know somebody else who's from that country you're targeting, around the corner, or your family, friends, the international club at your local university. Like you can't find people who can create localized content for you and would love to do it. And they're 20 to 30-year-olds, so they're probably better at doing some fun stuff on TikTok and Instagram than you're going to go find an agency, and you're going to wait to go global until you go pay thousands of dollars to an agency that you just met through somebody's friend. That stuff frustrates me because there's stuff you can do today and it doesn't even require much,
Right.
So I think that's an opportunity that's being lost. And a little bit of a side topic, but I would say this is a massive one, which is we're not understanding and respecting Latin America as a market. It's our neighbor. We've never done that. Even as an economic development partner, we've never invested in it. China has come in. And in my view, right now, America and China are engaged in a proxy retail war in Latin America.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
Well, I mean, you're seeing what in the Q1 of 2024, 700,000 containers went from China into Mexico. A lot of those containers, yes, they came in cross-border under the de minimis into the US. Shein and Temu are examples of that. But a lot of it stayed in Mexico and went out to Latin America because their price point is much more attractive for Latin America. They're massively invading. Let's be more.
That is the wrong word. That is the wrong word.
Let's be more. They're
infiltrating,
which is also has a negative connotation. But I would say they're accessing and they're taking advantage of an opportunity that, frankly, we should have been paying attention to. Our price points are more challenging, so I understand that. Logistically, oddly enough, we probably have a challenge shipping into a lot of Latin American countries. China should too, but they have such a massive amount of volume that they can take advantage of it. And those volumes are the name of the game for shipments and logistics. But they're now setting up manufacturing. And I would like to say that, Mexico is going to be our Shenzhen coming shortly because China is setting up manufacturing facilities. We had this brilliant idea of a trade war to block Chinese imports into the U.S. And like all great intentions, the outcome of that meant that China has really propelled their companies, their manufacturers into other markets. They're setting up infrastructure and they're getting around a lot of those issues because humans find a way. And it's not just Chinese. I have lots of wonderful friends in China as well as elsewhere in the world. We're all human. At the end of the day, we find a way. So they found a way and we need to compete there.
So some takeaways here for brands that, the moves that you're not making that you should be is, I think, Josh, you're saying get on social, validate volume of content, what's sticking, what's not, before you ever bring in a big agency, right? Like you're saying, validate.
Squeeze the juice out of what you have before you start paying an agency. Because not only that, if you know you're going to pay an agency, you're going to be a lot more informed about what you're paying for and what's really hard for them, what's the hardest lift, and pay for the hard lifts, not the easy ones. I also want to say that, I think that we, as we say, go on social, the channel evolution I talk about, I just gave a talk on, I call it 10 and 5, 10 ways that cross-border is going to change in the next 5 years. I just gave that at yesterday or 2 days ago, the Mid-American Trade Summit. Some of the major issues that we need to be thinking about are channel evolution, meaning social commerce. We are still thinking of it in our minds as this kind of, that's the fun little kids channel. It's still thought of in that way from our investment. If you look at the percentage of marketing investment that goes to social, some of the biggest brands, because we're still fighting with TikTok. Fine, guys. If you want to go after TikTok, I have no problem with that. I have lots of personal views around TikTok and what that means for America. That's fine. But do not deny that it is a major channel in other markets. And 50%, I think there's 50 million people on TikTok, eyeballs on TikTok in Mexico alone, 50 million people. People are on TikTok before they go anywhere else, including Instagram, to figure out what they're going to buy. So the advertising on Google and Facebook in many markets, because you say, hey, that's what we do in America, we're going to do it there. You may be losing money. And for some of the biggest brands I consult with, one of the biggest cross-border retailers in America, I went down and did a market research, and we did some studies in the field, interviewing people in Mexico. And turns out no one's going to Google and Facebook in that particular brand's experience. And they're not even going on Instagram. They're going into TikTok and then going in to download their app for purchasing. So evaluate where you're putting your money, because that's the driver.
Yeah, no, that's sound advice. And we get that information a lot when we're putting together our ICPs, our customer profiles, and that's a branding play, right? Like wherever your customer is where you need to be. Yeah. Because next week we're Branders Fast. There's a lot of talking about founders, and we're talking about like the entrepreneurs themselves behind the companies. I'm interested to get your perspective on a couple areas. We are obsessed with instant gratification, yet to build a brand and to, more importantly, for a founder to be, in a position to really win, they have to really focus on their personal brand. So how does a founder manage this idea of my brand needs to push volume on TikTok, but me as a founder, I still need to push out content, but not necessarily on TikTok, on a different platform? Like, give me your thoughts and perceptions around this.
I mean, just to restate it so I understand, I mean, the idea of like, let's say I have a brand called Justice Juice.
Right. Shout out to Justice Juice.
Proceeds going to first responders and better collaboration and community between law enforcement and the community, right? That was not a planned pitch. I'm a founder of that. You're saying, so how do I bridge the gap that I do very silly videos and very interesting videos and quotes on TikTok around justice, but then I also am a founder on LinkedIn, et cetera.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I don't know how much lead gen I get out of for the company out of my LinkedIn posts. I'm starting to actually explore that right now, because I think you're in this weird space where you're getting outsized engagement on LinkedIn from posts. I don't want to say it like everyone's like, oh, LinkedIn is different than TikTok, and the TikTok content you shouldn't be putting on it. Because marketing agencies, we love to say, I mean, I'm not a marketing agency, I do social content, but we like to make it very complex. And it's like, it's true. There's definitely the format for TikTok, but you put a TikTok video on LinkedIn, everyone's like so surprised. They're like, that's the funniest thing I've seen in 3 days. Yeah, because you've been watching articles on LinkedIn. So anytime you're breaking the monotony, you get it. Is it a consistent strategy? No, but I think that you got to keep changing it up. But LinkedIn to me is speaking to other potential B2B partners that are excited about the mission.
It's really interesting, right? Like you talk about like this idea of zagging when everyone is zigging, right? Well, like LinkedIn is catching up because now they have shorts, right? Aren't they starting to explore that?
Yeah, and we're on LinkedIn right now.
And we are. So shout out to LinkedIn. Let's make some shorts happen.
Let me ask you something though, Steve. Do you mind? I got a question for you, because you're playing with this space. I'm grappling with so I was just at one of the biggest GMV generators for TikTok Shop in the US. And I say that with a big caveat of no one knows what's happening with TikTok Shop in terms of strategy. But there's a lot of challenges because brands come in and they want to do a branding play on TikTok. And there's the word they say, oh, TikTok's not a branding play. It's a get everybody out there talking about it, and don't worry about what it looks like. Your brand's going to look all sorts of things with a 70-year-old on a couch and blah, blah, blah. But Instagram isn't. But then again, Instagram isn't converting as well. So what's the thought on that? Like Instagram versus TikTok, branding versus not?
I think that the classic marketer in me wants to draw a sales funnel and start to identify the different conversion point and the different type of content per platform. But I also know that that's kind of bullshit these days, where you kind of have to take the sales funnel and throw it out the window, because we're not, it's not the normal funnel circa 2015. So yeah. Here's a great example. I've done a lot of work with Dude Wipes in the past, and Dude Wipes killed it on social. Right? They absolutely.
What Dude Wipes are?
So for those that don't know, Dude Wipes are a flushable wipe made for men, but really made for humans. Flushable, completely flushable.
That's great, because I keep telling my son, like, you cannot put these in the toilet.
Dude Wipes are flushable, and they have the accreditations, and they've gone through. I've been in those meetings, and they talked about a lot of scientific shit, literally, all pun intended, around the product. But Dude Wipes kills it on social, right?
Yeah.
And for them, they are really good at the community management, at the commenting game, at just showing up at the right places. And for them, it's a kind of a brand play because it comes down to brand recall, right? The more times you get a brand out there and you're just showing up, the more times you're going to imprint yourself in the human psyche, in the mind of your consumer. They're not posting. If Taco Bell posts something like, hey, it's lunchtime, come on in for a Mexi Melt, they're not commenting, hey, buy one, get one free at, Walmart. No, they're posting, you're going to need us. That's it.
Okay.
Drop the pen. And for that, it's a lot of engagement.
So, okay. But then when you look at the two platforms, for example, Instagram versus TikTok, to me, Instagram's much more curated. It's all pretty stuff. On TikTok, when I find most of us are the same, you see a really curated video on TikTok and you swipe past it because like, this isn't real. This is they're selling me something. But I'm wondering, the same psyche has to appear also on Instagram, where nowadays you still look at something manicured and curated, and maybe you're like, no, you know what? I'll go to TikTok because I want to see some real people. I don't know if that's happening. I think it is.
I think it is.
I don't understand how Instagram they had everything there for the taking, but I will tell you the conversion, it's just so much easier to purchase something on TikTok Shop than Instagram Shop.
Do you think that Instagram's biggest downfall was they tried to do two things, right? They tried to do the in-feed and the short form reels, right? Or the shorts or whatever you want to call them. And whereas TikTok has come in and only does one thing.
Yeah, I mean, sadly enough, humans have now reduced their muscle capacity to just this. They can't even do that as much anymore. You can just do this. Yeah. And TikTok was like, all right, we'll tell you what you want when you do this. Just keep doing this. Yeah. And you can purchase as well. And Instagram, you still have to be like, all right, and it kind of works, but then you got to go into store. It just doesn't. It's a little
clunky. And I think for brands, I think so many brands are just because perhaps their audience, and more than likely their audience is on both platforms. I think for those that are on Instagram, probably also on TikTok. I don't know what that statistic is, but I'm sure there's a piece of data that shows it.
Yeah.
So knowing that, we have to check that box now. I have to be on Instagram. And so now I have to post in feed, and I also have to post over here. So what do you post in feed? And the classic marketer in me says, well, if they're in feed, maybe we use that as more value-based carousels, or maybe we're doing more promotional things. And then we use the short to drive traffic to that piece of content that we just posted. So you're trying to get them more in the funnel, quote unquote, but it's still it's still not as seamless as TikTok one click.
And the messaging is a challenge. I mean, the biggest parallel to me, I'm just thinking of this, is like, if I'm walking in Soho and I have an option of I can go into the brand's gallery and I walk in. Now I'm already engaged, I'm seeing the stuff, but it's all curated. I know that experience. But if I'm walking down the street and 3 kids walk by me and they jump out and they say, hey man, check this thing out. This is really cool new thing. Those are the different experiences. That's TikTok on the street, whereas the curated is more Instagram. And I'll tell you, I believe the kids on the street that don't seemingly have a motivation, we've got to understand that they do, and we'll start getting smarter at that. But and that brings up a discussion too. I think people need to understand, which is the micro, macro, nano, the influencer level. And I'll say this from a cross-border context, just because that's the theme of the day. It's a super exciting time for businesses, SMB land as well, but big too, because they can find those tribes in different markets on social and they can go after them. And yes, there's certain clunkiness around cross-border for TikTok right now. It's not enabled. They went for it and failed in Asia. They'll relaunch it soon enough.
What do you mean?
So they tried to do cross-border duties and taxes and payments all integrated into the shop so that you could sell. So imagine a world where you've got a TikTok following in France, but you've never sold in France. Somebody in France goes on TikTok, they click buy. And right now it's like, well, how am I buying? I got to buy through payment solutions. You have my local payment solution. Is it integrated in? Shipping wise, are you going to ship it? What's the duties and taxes on that? So it's essentially a non-starter. The way to do it, by the way, if you are a company that wants to do it, a lot of friction, but better than nothing. you send them to your website, and your website should already be enabled for cross-border. You should have, whether it's in Shopify,
or Woo.
Yeah, Shopify, Woo. You use a Zonos. You could use Avalara on the back end as well, which is what powers Global E and all that. But you can use a Passport shipping. There's lots of solutions out there. Digital River's another one. But whatever you use for your website's enabled. So now send your social traffic cross-border into your website and make sure that that's all set up. But that's not the main point of the topic. The idea is micro influencers nowadays, or nano influencers, are powerful. And the reason you can imagine, we all know they're powerful because I like to say, when you go into the analogy I say, when I go into a party, a cocktail party, let's say I've been in the country for 10 years, I'm going to leave. I make a big announcement to everybody. I got 1,000 people in the party. I never go to a party with 1,000 people, but let's say I did. And I say, I'm leaving everybody. Huh? What?
You're not going to Diddy parties? Sorry.
No, it's funny. If I did this at a Diddy party, no one would even listen because it's the least interesting. But if I say I'm leaving, no one would care.
Right.
They'd care minimally because it stopped their drink or whatever. Or maybe I had some peripheral engagement with them. They're sad that I'm leaving. My wife wouldn't make a giant announcement. She'd go one by one by two, etc. And she'd just say her quiet goodbyes. And people might cry. They feel like she's really engaged with them and she's left. The bigger the audience, and I did this with Paris Hilton Skincare when we launched that, 40 million followers, but there's a natural disconnect. The lower the followers, the less each individual follower feels that they're engaged with you. So nano influencers are much more powerful for conversion. However, historically, that also meant a lot of expense to how do you reach them? How do you engage with them? Every one of them you have to have an engagement with. It's a pain in the ass. It's a lot of work. So that disconnect was there. That's eroded. So now we have to reevaluate the ROI on nano engagement. 100 to 1,000 followers, but you can put it out to 100 different of those with just a code on TikTok, and they get paid out without your system even doing anything because TikTok does it for you. That's the real power. And that's a power for global as well.
And I think that so many brands are archaic in thinking that, oh, I need an influencer like a Paris Hilton or a Kardashian or someone with 1 million followers. Like that's the goal. When actually, and you're spot on. And this is, it's better to have 100, nano influencers all just spreading out your little, nodes all over the place than that one person. Yeah, man, totally. I just got a message from one of our followers that said, "Watch, Steven, you are going to get canceled, LOL." Well, then it hasn't been a Pizza Friday Fireside chat unless that conversation's happening. You're all in on TikTok, I sense. I mean, I'll tell you, I find it an exhausting and complicated and platform. I personally would love for it. Look, I think it'd be great if TikTok didn't exist, if the demand wasn't there, because the world would probably be a better place. People might pay attention to people for more than 7 seconds. The reality is I'm a pragmatist, and that is where the eyeballs are, and it's the format. I came up from the world. I was a trained actor. I did a lot of training in improv theater. I ran my own troops doing things like that. And I always like to say, give me the structure and we will improvise within it. Well, you've been given a structure, everybody. You've been told eyeballs now have an attention span of 15 to 30 seconds. You have to do it in a vertical format, and people will do this if they don't like you. Right. Go. And then we have the freedom to do whatever we want. We can try to make it meaningful. We don't have to make it meaningful. You can try to get them engaged now. That's the reality of the world. I think that what TikTok Shop has a problem with is TikTok internally, frankly, is a mess right now. They have a lot of changeover. You speak to two people, and then the 2 weeks later, they're two different people. There isn't a sustainable strategy, and any agency that claims they know how to do it well on TikTok, and every one of them does. I came from this with all of them. They don't know, and they will tell you on the side, look, we tried it with 5 different brands. One of them worked, which wasn't the one we thought. The other ones didn't work. You've got 3 options on TikTok. You're going to have creators engage your content, and you're going to build out creator content. You got to get the content ready. Then you got to ad boost it. And then soon you got to live stream it, which is what the big flavor of the month is. That's because 85% of Douyin or TikTok's revenue in China
is live streaming. It's a live streaming platform. So I don't know if we're going to adapt it that quickly, but the problem is that there's not a direct correlation. And it kills me to tell clients, this agency would be good for you. This wouldn't. This is the strategy, because it's still so early to understand and build an actual sustainable strategy on TikTok. So I'm not excited about it as a reality, but I accept that it is a reality.
That's the pragmatism in you. You said live streaming, Josh. We've had this conversation a couple times, and this is really fascinating to me. That brands need to be doing live streams, and they need to be doing like long form. Like, explain this concept. Like, what do you mean by live stream?
So let me paint the picture
now, but this isn't what you mean.
No, although, man, if we have to, what do we got to sell? I got a half-eaten protein. I got a protein bar.
I'm gonna have magic mushroom somewhere. No.
Yeah, try that. You're gonna get canceled. This is what I'm saying. So, the world of live streaming, we started it. We had QVC, right? Home Shopping Network. That all those people are no longer really active, and all the younger people forgot all about it. They don't even know that format. China has made it a thing. I actually launched a CNR Mall and QVC joint venture in China with the ambassador, and we've got the ambassador on there selling Vitamixes and all sorts of stuff. And the State Department was not in love with that idea, but it generated jobs in America, which was a beautiful thing. But that was a different world. And even there, that was TV shopping. That was 78-year-olds in China. Now in China, it's TikTok live streaming. And if you go into these rooms or these buildings, they have cubicles after cubicles with sets set up, and people are live streaming for 8 hours at a pop. Now, why 8 hours at a pop, and how? Part of it's set up as a talk show. They have rotating people, etc. But the idea is you need to have enough statistically relevant data to start analyzing the dips and the curves, who's watching what. And they'll have 20 people analyzing that stuff and then say, hey, okay, we got to go in this direction, do this, do that. It's a live organic experience. That is what's driving it. So when they came over here, only as recent as 6 months ago, really, when they started to have those conversations with the agencies I was at an agency called Creator Rev and a few others, they started setting up these studios and said, great, do you think you could get Jennifer Aniston or somebody to do a live streaming for 4 hours or so? And you're like, how's 4 minutes? And it wouldn't be Jennifer, it would be somebody else who happens to have 1 million followers.
Right.
The concept hasn't translated. You're getting, but you understand that you need to have people on long enough, because TikTok will say, hey, we're going to throw 500 followers at it now. Okay, it's doing well in this demographic. Let's tweak it. Let's do 1,000 followers that are this demographic based on the first 5. And they're constantly throwing at it. Yeah.
So the data, so you as a live streamer, you're going live, you have a team looking at the data and feeding you, hey, this type of content is hitting at this exact moment.
Yeah.
As I do more of that content that is hitting, the algorithm, TikTok, sees that it's hitting and that we're feeding into like the right data the algorithm wants. So then they throw us more followers, and it becomes this
thing. And imagine the layers here, the Venn diagram here, because you're saying, well, it's not just if I do. So imagine the old key, the way we think of it is, oh, I've got a static audience of 87-year-olds watching my thing on the TV. That's the audience. What's working for them? But no, now you're saying, well, the audience itself can change constantly. So if I throw this up and it's for a 22-year-old, oh, look, they're really interested in this. And you know what? They're buying more. So it's not just they're interested, they're watching it, but look at the conversion of that demographic, et cetera, versus this. Let's go in that direction. Let's abandon those other audiences, or because this is what's getting us the money. And so it's just amazingly data driven.
Wow.
And that's what the Chinese are coming in with, an awareness and a focus on data that we not only don't inherently, I feel like on a wide scale do, but we don't like the fact that that's the case. We almost
I'm upset by it. By the fact that we're having this conversation, I'm really upset that's where we're heading.
Right, because we feel like we're still creative. We feel like I've created a great product. People are going to like it. It's great. It's like, well, actually, it's this demographic, and it's going to be this, and it's like, holy crap, this is just a money grab. Yeah, it feels empty, and it kind of is. Which I will say, if we can transition a little bit into the discussion around, what we're witnessing today, and I will preface it by saying I'm a peace-loving believer that human spirit will prevail beyond political and geographic lines.
The biggest asterisk I've heard recently, but go on.
That's the preface.
This is so Josh doesn't get canceled.
Yeah, which they'll cut all that part out and just take the last part.
Right.
China, biggest worry about the China kind of engagement, let's say, in the US. To me, the TikTok space, it's not about espionage and about tracking us. I think we're distracted by that because it's easier than saying the reality, which is China, they've come up with a platform that's getting eyeballs. And yes, you could argue we have a problem with social media in general. Congress and Senate really should be going after social media in general, but that's a fundamental problem because they can't care. Humans is what they have a problem with because we have a natural tendency to be lazy, I guess, or want short content, etc. TikTok has come in. They said, wait, we've got the eyeballs. So now they've made a platform with eyeballs. And then they've because of their economy, because of the challenges of selling online there, because it's expensive, et cetera, to keep the noise, they manufacture our products for the last multiple decades, but they started to evolve into making their own brands because they've seen they're giving over margins to US brands. So they've made, and now those brands have stopped being named things like harmonious yoga pants. Like, so, you can see, you can't tell anymore if they're Chinese brands that necessarily on Amazon. Right. So they've started to really perfect that. So now they've got the brands, they've got the eyeballs with TikTok in the US. They've got the logistics that ships over in droves, like massive amounts. But one component that they haven't had until now is all those agencies that were perfecting their data-driven analysis on sales in China and cut their teeth in it have now decided, hey, let's go to the US, set up our offices in California, and let's operate to service not necessarily the US companies because they have trouble servicing the US companies because the US companies have a different expectation from client management. Let's just service the Chinese companies that come over. So you've got the perfect three storm. You've got the products, you've got the agencies that know how to do it, and the platform they know how to do it on with all the eyeballs. So that's the perfect storm that's challenging a lot of our companies, and we've got to step it up in terms of investing and understanding the platform, the data behind it, and how to sell on it. Or ban the thing, or just ban the thing. But that's not going to happen because something else will come up.
Right. Well, no, a perfect storm it's funny as you're saying this. I've been a victim of the perfect storm. Years ago, I was working with an Amazon brand, #1 Amazon seller for grill tongs. And then all of a sudden a new brand came up that had a little bit of a brand, but like was just able to beat the margins. We're able to have the same product, but we're just winning. And after doing some research, they were a Chinese company. And, and here we were operating out of New York City, and we couldn't win.
You can't. I mean, the top 10 sellers on TikTok right now, most of them are Chinese brands, whether you know it or not. Some of them are based in the US. So then it becomes a bigger, more existential question. What does it mean to be a Chinese brand? But they know the algorithm. They understand the data. They look daily at the data, and they're putting in the work. I mean, to be fair, it's not rocket science, but it is work. And we have to understand that we got to ratchet it up or just relegate ourselves to not doing that. But we're not going to win.
Let me ask a follow-up question. Because it sounds like, for these brands that are Chinese brands, that's a transparency issue, right? Like they're not forthright in saying that we are a Chinese brand. You do enough research, you could figure it out, but they're trying to placate as an American brand, right? Sure. Nice logo, good English from a content perspective. But Gen Z, who is notoriously been on record saying, as well as having the data to back it, that they only support brands or are more likely to support brands that are purpose-driven, that are transparent. Is there a tension there, especially as this Gen Alpha, your kids and my kids, start to come up where they want to buy Bomba socks, not necessarily the cheapest ones on Amazon or whatever. So is there a tension that's going to be happening soon?
I think it's a great question because look, it harks at the fundamental question of why are our brands doing good things for the environment? Remember when the days were where there are a few of the brands were really doing well, and then like doing good things for the environment, but they weren't doing well financially. And then like the PE people come in and like, let's stop that silliness. Let's stop this.
Right.
And then it started to actually convert to sales. And now, as you're saying, the data shows that people are buying based on that. The moment that happens, for good or for bad, all companies are going to be starting to do it, including Chinese companies. They haven't figured out just yet, but what's to stop them from saying, yeah, I'm a Chinese company, but guess what? I really want to support, undernourished kids in,
Nairobi,
part of the country. I won't say,
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I want to stay neutral. I want to support those kids. And this is our mission. It may start with part of their mission is I want to just sell product. And it seems like these Americans really want it to mean something. So let's do that. But maybe it becomes, well, it is doing good. So,
right.
and frankly, the inverse is true. I know a lot of Chinese who really support. They have a different way of doing a kind of mission-driven work. Usually it's with family offices and people that they know through that. But they look, I believe, as I said, and I preface it, humans are humans. We do care about our families. We care about security. We care about similar things when you take away all the other noise. So I think they'll find other ways. But I do think that the question is, so the answer is, yes, I think that there's a weird complexity. I don't think it falls on geographic or origin lines. I think companies in general have to figure out that. I think there's a question to me about what does it mean to be a Chinese, US, or Latin American company. I think that world is changing massively. And I don't even understand how we're going to classify this. Because as I said, 700,000 containers going into China, manufacturing going into China, warehousing all in Tijuana coming over the border into the US. At what point does that company cease to be a Chinese company? And there are legal lines to it, but the legal lines say they've now set up an office in Mexico, maybe a majority of 51%. I don't even know if that's a requirement, but is Mexican owned. But that doesn't mean 49% isn't Chinese owned.
Right.
Is it now a Chinese Mexican, like we say, a Chinese American, Italian American? They're Chinese Mexican. Are they Mexican? Yeah, they're Mexican. Is their revenue staying? What does it matter? Is their revenue staying there? Are their kids living back in China and they're funding that? Or what do we care about as humans about the origin anymore, because it's all mixed?
And I think what we're going to end with, and this wouldn't be a branding chat if I didn't end with like the most purpose-driven brand that's going to solve all the problems, that has the answer. Patagonia, their shareholders are Mother Earth.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they have given it up, and partly tongue in cheek, and partly they're always the case study, but they have, from a purpose-driven perspective, the fact that they've given and have that letter out about Planet Earth being their biggest shareholder and all of that. As an optimist, I am optimistic that this idea of global brand, and not even having the labels, and I'm a Chinese brand, I'm an American brand, but like, no, I'm just a global brand, or I'm a brand of planet Earth. Like, I hope that we can get to that area one day, because then I think that we can really sell based on the things that we should be selling on, which is product features and benefits and purpose and all that other shit, as opposed to, well, I can't buy from that company because they're from China, or I'll never buy an American made something,
I will say, and again, leaving it off with the kind of on a positive note and optimism, I think that at the end of the day, companies have been driven by revenue and profit. That has clearly correlated over the last couple of decades, or maybe the last decade, to doing good and doing well. You have to Patagonias of the world, but other companies as well have been doing, the Tom's 1-for-1s and all these things. They've infused every marketing message. And I do think that other countries are learning from that. And I think, as Sting would say in the song Russians, right? Do the Russians, do the Chinese, do they love their children too? I will say they do.
Yeah.
And they very much want a good, positive future. They don't always see us as part of that equation, and we don't see them as that equation. But from a brand's perspective, you are going to see, and you still do not underestimate, because we have a lot of weird messaging around China and other countries that really cloud our judgment. They want to know that their environment's being protected, that if you're an outdoor brand, they want to know that they love breathing fresh air too. In fact, they've done a really good job cleaning up their air in very short amount of time. Having that part of your message helps both for messaging overseas, but also they are going to be starting to message that. And that's a good thing for everybody.
It absolutely is. This has been such an incredible spirited conversation. I mean, we talked about founders and just branding in general. I mean, I didn't expect to get into this giant TikTok conversation, but I'm so grateful that we did, and really the future. So Josh, tell everyone where they can find you online and all your links.
Yeah. So obviously, if you want to follow me on YouTube or somewhere on Instagram, anywhere on the Vanbassador, VANBASSADOR. And then I just launched Justice Juice, and I got a great song about bringing America together that I built out with a couple of friends and my friend ChatGPT. I will send it to you. It's quite amazing in terms of what's possible now. But I want everyone to listen to that at Drink Justice on any social platform, or if you search for in the what is it called? Justice Juice or something on Spotify or iTunes, wherever you get your music. Listen to that song, because I think it's going to bring us all together at a time of need here in America in the political polarization that we exist in. So Drink Justice.
Your passion is palpable, and we'll throw all those links into the YouTube and all the other stuff. And again, if you're watching this and you have not gotten your tickets to next week's Branders Fest, we have 5 days of just incredible content. Monday's Rob Meyerson talking about really the brand plan and how to get started. Tuesday's Matt Davies talking about brand strategy. Wednesday is Terry Goldstein, who is going to be dropping so many amazing nuggets on design. Thursday is Craig Dubitsky from the Hello Company, which is a toothpaste, and now he just launched Happy, and he's an absolute beast of an entrepreneur. And then Friday, we have a panel with Sabelle Jones from SEGD, the Society of Experiential Graphic Design, Joanne Chan from Turner Duckworth, who is such an incredible agency that they've done everything from Coca-Cola to Metallica to Campbell's Soup. Like, their branding is in your cupboard, as well as Christian Soralco from Allegro 234, a close friend of ours. And probably, if I was ever going to try to take over the world with some really weird person, it would be Christian. We had a podcast, and it was all about Pinky in the Brain, and it was absolutely incredible. So for more on all of this, brandersmagazine.com/brandersfest. It's effing free. There's no reason why you shouldn't join the other 200 plus registrants that we have currently. And so I hope to see you there. And until next time, everyone, peace out. Enjoy your weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Let's exit and we'll end the stream.